Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. A Ukrainian diver wanted by Germany over the 2022 Nord Stream pipeline explosions has been arrested in the Croatian city of Pula on Wednesday. Now, the case comes back into focus as Europe confronts fresh threats to critical infrastructure and NATO's eastern flank, including an explosive naval drone destroyed near a Romanian gas platform. And joining us now is McNamee, co-founder of the Ukraine Business News Network. Good to have you back with us. Right, so let's begin with the facts here. We have this new arrest of this alleged suspect, so Vladimir Z. Now, he was apprehended under a European arrest warrant in Croatia just this Wednesday. So how significant is this arrest? What do we know so far after 4 years of this case?
So, well, the arrest, frankly, isn't terribly significant since it's become clear. The big piece of information is, of course, the whodunit, and that seems to be increasingly clear that it was Ukrainian actors, likely non-state actors. So it's important to distinguish between whether this was authorized sort of officially, covertly by the government in Kyiv, or these are non-state actors sort of acting independently. So that seems to be what has occurred here, from what we can tell. This is, of course, following upon the earlier arrest, I believe a year or two ago, of the accomplice in this act. So really, who did it is not quite as important. But this is really quite more the meaning of this is actually what's relatively significant in all of this, because this is really, just part of the overall hybrid war that both sides are conducting. And this is sort of the latest update in it, and finding another accomplice in this attack by Ukraine. And so that's, I mean, if you've noticed, we're not talking about the front line anymore, and we haven't for months. We're talking about all these various attacks and updates that both Ukraine and Russia are doing outside of the borders of Ukraine and far, far away from the front line. So that's what I would say is sort of the significance of what is occurring here. The other point that I'd also highlight in particular is that he's arrested in Croatia. So now Croatia has a decision to make, right, as far as extraditing him to Germany. Some would say, Ukrainians, of course, Poles, Baltics, others would say that these are legitimate military targets that, frankly, Ukraine was fully justified in hitting. German courts, of course, are putting forth the opposing argument to say that, no, this is energy infrastructure of a European state, of an EU member, of Germany, and hence this is an illegal attack. So there's kind of legal issues here, but then also sort of more strategic ones as well at play regarding this the arrest here of this accomplice.
Yeah, you raised also an interesting point there, how these different countries view this. I mean, this particular individual now that was apprehended on Wednesday, he was actually also apprehended in Poland, wasn't extradited, released, but at the same time we have this case also, I think, of the other person you mentioned who's in pretrial custody in Germany right now. He was apprehended in Italy in 2025, but then extradited. So also from a legal perspective, and also you said involvement of non-state actors, but how clear, what kind of evidence do we have, or what do we need to know conclusively that that wasn't the case?
That would be extremely hard to figure out. And frankly, I would imagine that there would be no trace back to this. And my own speculation was that either they were acting on their own. They are, of course, had been at some point associated with the state, and obviously with the intentions of more broadly of the Ukrainian state. But it is very plausible that they were more or less acting on their own accord. It would be very, very difficult to ever prove if they were sort of officially, covertly authorized by the government in Kyiv to conduct such attacks. That's possible, but trying to prove that would be extremely difficult. And again, this gets at sort of the next layer of what's going on here, and how both Russia and Ukraine using plausible deniability to expand, in many ways, this quite reckless hybrid war well beyond the borders of Ukraine. And so if this cannot be traced back to the government in Kyiv, and these are just sort of ideologically aligned actors who may or may not have worked in the government in an official capacity in the past, really that's an entirely different actor. And one, by the way, that is deniable from the government's point of view, but also uncontrollable. And so can these actors can be conducting, both Russian actors and Ukrainian actors can be conducting attacks more or less with their own resources, with their own networks, on their own accord, with perhaps approval by the respective governments, but maybe not officially condoned or authorized or even encouraged and financed and things like this. So this is where you get into this, as we're seeing, this hybrid warfare of who's actually doing this and at whose behest, with what authority, with what resources. And those things are far more difficult to prove, if you could ever even possibly prove them.
Yeah, hard to prove. Nevertheless, the case is happening right now. I mean, it's going to be very public. It already is public. I mean, the Germans trying to push this forward. And I mean, the evidence, I mean, they haven't said that there's state intervention. As you said, it's very hard to prove something like that, if ever that has ever been the case. Nevertheless, if this goes on, what does this do as this case continues between the relationship between Germany and Ukraine? I mean, Germany has become a critical ally of Ukraine. And if this keeps pushing, there's also voices within Germany that aren't really clear on the future of Nord Stream itself. So how does this go into the wider relationship and wider themes here between Germany and Ukraine?
Yeah, and this is a consistent issue where you highlight, and that's why Russia's cheering at all of this, because you highlight a lot of these inevitable ruptures and divisions that arise within intra-European politics and relationships, and add in the point about Nord Stream 2, that you have a United States administration which is at times covertly and at times more overtly trying to support re-engaging Russia with Nord Stream 2 and in energy projects. So a lot of different cooks in the kitchen, if you will, related to this specific issue, and then the broader issue of the energy relationship of Russia with Europe, in all European countries. Related to Germany and Ukraine, frankly, I feel optimistic that we'll get through this yet again. This is fundamental security concern for Germany, and the German government, the German people, by and large, have recognized this and understood this. In this fifth year of the war, quite consistently, Germany has become now the largest provider in absolute terms to Ukraine in terms of both humanitarian and defense support. And filling that gap that was left by the United States, helping fill that gap at least. So I don't see that really changing this. This is fundamental to Germany understands. It's fundamental to their national security. So that doesn't change it. What I'm more concerned about is that this becomes a political issue. This strictly legal case becomes a political issue over time. And as you have rising support for AfD in particular, so the far-right populist party that has linkages to Russia, overt linkages to Russia, this becomes more concerning over time. What would this, topics like this, do they energize the far right and help them capitalize further on the diminishing support of the mainstream parties within Germany? So where are we in a year from now or beyond with elections coming up in Germany?
Yeah, and also raising an interesting point there on the wider issue of sabotage and hybrid attacks. Just get a quick comment on what we've seen in the last weeks, especially the last 24 hours. Also what happened in the Black Sea and in Romania near that gas facility where apparently a fighter jet shot down a Russian sea drone. I mean, this as well now, I mean, what do you make of it? Is this also an area where there will also be more that Europe needs to do? How does that also legally come into all of this?
Sure. This is, and Putin knows he can keep pushing in all sorts of areas, wherever where they want, because you're not getting enough pushback, I suppose you could say, that would actually deter Russia from pushing in various areas. We're seeing drones, of course, downed and deep within Polish and Romanian territory consistently over the past year. So this is all going on really for some period of time, and as long as Europe doesn't push back strongly, Putin doesn't feel deterred. So on the other side, though, just a very quick comment. Ukraine is also quite effective deep strikes just in the last 24 hours, as you mentioned, the latest update here, hitting an oil facility in Perm now. And we're seeing the forces in Moscow and around. Last week, Ukraine conducted its large drone swarm attack on Moscow and the region with obviously some success. So all of this is heating up and just set to escalate even further as we move into winter.
All right, so giving us the latest there on some very complex issues. I really appreciate that, always having you with us. Very insightful. Mark McNamee there, co-founder of the Ukraine Business News Network. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for watching World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.